Sometime in the next week, Parliament will vote on probably the greatest tax change in your life. It's the carbon dioxide tax, to make us cut the gases we're told are heating the world dangerously. It's a tax on coal-fired electricity that will raise billions of dollars a year and probably cost thousands of jobs. That's a huge call. So, to see if it makes sense, we're going to do exactly what Julia Gillard has told us to do.
Addressing climate change all starts with the science. The government accepts the science.
We are going to start with the science, and we've asked prominent Australian scientists to help explain it for us in an extended panel session on the 4 big questions about global warming. Emeritus Professor Garth Paltridge was a chief research scientist for the CSIRO Division of Atmospheric Research. Peter Ridd is Professor of Marine Physics at James Cook University, and his research has included monitoring coral reefs. Professor Bob Carter of James Cook University is a marine geologist and co-editor of the just-published non-governmental panel on climate change interim report. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. The first question is, are humans warming the planet? And is Julia Gillard right?
Our climate is changing. This is caused by carbon pollution.
Bob, climate changing, caused by humans?
Yes, of course, and the difficulty here is the unspoken words. Climate always changes. That's the missing agenda, and every climate scientist knows this. Nothing unusual about climate change. The idea that somehow climate was stable until the Industrial Revolution and our carbon dioxide emissions is simply silly. But in saying climate is changing and we will accept the science, the Prime Minister is agreeing with you, agreeing with us. We all accept the science, but which science? And the issue is, to what degree are human carbon dioxide emissions making extra changes to climate on top of the natural changes? That's the key question.
Garth, it seems to me that she's saying, and the change is caused by carbon pollution, she's saying it's all done by humans.
Well, that's pushing things rather too far. I mean, the short answer to the question as to whether carbon dioxide is going to increase the temperature of the world, the short answer and the misleading answer is yes. The trouble is that you are really concerned with how much change is going to take place. And the scientists these days, the climate scientists, tend to vastly overstate the problems of an increasing temperature of the world due to carbon dioxide.
And I'm going to have a look at some of those other predictions they make about that. Peter, what also struck me is the use of the word pollution, carbon pollution. Can you tell us, are we talking carbon pollution? Are we talking carbon dioxide? Is carbon dioxide a pollutant?
Well, I mean, it's a natural gas, and it's important, it's in fact essential to plants, so it's actually stretching it a little bit to say it's pollution. But I guess if you do really believe that we're going to, you know, really cook up, then perhaps you could regard it as a correct usage of the term. But it is a bit stretching it, and sometimes you wonder whether it's been used as a sort of a media thing more than using it as a fact.
Yeah. Well, look, because I've just looked up the latest satellite data on my iPad of warming over the last 30 years, and it's about, as you can see, about a third of a degree. Is that really a big warming? Can Julia Gillard say that's caused by our gases?
No, I don't think there's any way we can do that. I mean, essentially all this boils down to looking at these big models that predict the climate, and when you look at the details, the uncertainties involved in those make it, in my view, that in fact they have no predictive value whatsoever, in fact.
All right, so when we're told that our climate is changing and this is caused by carbon pollution, the answer from scientists is, well, it's changing, but it always changes, and what warming we've seen, we're not sure that carbon pollution is the main driver of it, and pollution might be a loaded word. All right, so to question 2, is any warming dangerous? Now, again, I want to ask you, is Julia Gillard right?
We'll see more bushfires and drought. We'll see agricultural land in the Murray-Darling Basin no longer able to be used for agriculture. We'll see icons like the Great Barrier Reef threatened and Kakadu.
Peter, are we going to see all these disasters? Is the science telling us that all these disasters, bushfires, droughts, Great Barrier Reef, true?
Well, Great Barrier Reef, it's really strange, you know, because all the corals that live on the Great Barrier Reef already live in New Guinea, where the temperatures is at least 1 or 2 degrees hotter. And in fact, they live in the Great Barrier Reef. In the Papua New Guinea, they grow faster and they're possibly more healthy as well. If there are temperature-stressed corals in Queensland, they're in Moreton Bay because it's too cold. Corals like it hot, essentially. In addition to that, it's also not well known that, in fact, the sea level has fallen on the Great Barrier Reef in the last 5,000 years, and this has killed a lot of the corals because they're now exposed at low tide. If, in addition to global warming, we get a sea level rise, as is the prediction, there'll be a massive explosion of corals on these areas that are now actually dead.
Are you telling me we're going to get more corals?
I don't think there's any doubt we'll have more corals.
Peter, you must be wrong, because I have consulted Ulf Goldberg and the alarmist David Suzuki, and have a look what they say. They say there's been a devastating effect so far from warming on the reef already.
At the moment, there's probably little doubt that this is our first major sign of a change in the tropics because of global warming.
I was shocked. I mean, in that short time from '88 to 2004, there are very, very perceptible changes.
Bob, Peter says he's not convinced about the corals. He's not seeing it. What about the rising sea levels and all that kind of stuff?
I find it hard to keep a straight face watching David Suzuki and Professor Goldberg say those things. There's absolutely no doubt what Peter has said is right. Corals grow up and they are controlled by the shallow water ones to average sea level. If average sea level is rising, and it is at the moment on the Queensland coast, and it will continue to do so, that is good for the Great Barrier Reef. If, and it's a very big if, and I don't think it'll happen, but if human warming was enough that it accentuated that sea level rise, then the corals would do even better. Score 100 Peter Ridd,
well,
0 David Suzuki.
He's not doing very well here, so I'm going to ask question 3 of Garth. And again, the question this time, question 3 is the science settled? And again, is Julia Gillard right? When she says only a few mad conservative journalists, I wonder who she's talking about, disagree with the global warming scientists.
I ask, who would I rather have on my side? Alan Jones, Piers Ackerman and Andrew Bolt, or the CSIRO, the Australian Academy of Science, the Bureau of Meteorology, NASA, the US National Atmospheric Administration and every reputable climate scientist in the world.
Garth, you work with the CSIRO, and she says all these institutions are against a few crazies like me.
Yes, well, that's, again, rather overstating the case. I mean, there are vast quantities of scientists who at least question the concept of man-made global warming. It is true that the ones that go public are usually scientists either who have retired or who come from other disciplines.
Nothing to lose.
They've got nothing to lose. But in this day and age, it can be fairly dangerous to one's career if you are a climate scientist and express some vociferous objection to the concept of dangerous global warming.
Well, in fact, I thought you made an interesting point, Peter, because you sent a letter to the chief scientist, Ian Chubb, saying, why don't you ensure that funding goes to sceptics as it goes to warmers who get billions?
Yes, I think this is very important because, you know, in our court system we have a prosecution, we have a defence, and by making the two sides argue, we can get to the truth, hopefully. And the defence side in a court case, actually their sole job is to try to find problems with the opposition argument. Now in science at the moment we only hear one side, and one side is funded. The other side is not funded, so we have a situation where in fact it's like a court case in China, and therefore the public actually can't have a great deal of faith in science at the moment. We need scientific reform, in fact, before we go and do things to our economy.
Right, I think that contributes to the groupthink, but let's go to question 4 because we're running out of time. Will Julia Gillard's tax actually work? By how much will the carbon dioxide tax cut the world's temperature? Or is Gillard right when she says That is an impossible question.
To what extent will the carbon tax reduce average global temperatures?
Well, this is a question that first put into the public debate, I believe, by Andrew Bolt, and it's a question not capable of answer because it assumes other countries aren't acting.
True or false? Is that a question incapable of answer, Bob?
Well, you have to use a computer model to answer it, and so it's a highly inaccurate answer. But any computer model, and there are different estimates, you end up with fractions of 10,000ths of a degree of warming averted for a 5% cut in Australia.
In Australia, because we've actually asked or got from 3 scientists some estimates of what the temperature would be. They range from about 4,000th of a degree if we went through and cut to 1/20,000th of a degree. Would you quarrel with those estimates, Garth?
No, they're in the ballpark, but because we're relying on models, we can't be exact on it, but roughly.
Essentially
right.
zero, Peter?
Yes, essentially zero. However, I mean, one of the arguments is that by cutting our own, then we have some sort of moral high ground to pretend that the Chinese and the Indians are going to cut theirs. I think that's the argument that they're using, in fact.
Well, gee, it doesn't seem to have gone too well for Julia Gillard. The scientists tell if they listen to them, a lot of what she claims as the basic facts about the global warming science seem false. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Garth Paltridge and Bob Carter and Peter Ridd, it's very good to have you. Okay.